In general, I would be favorably inclined toward reform, which actually broadened the participation within the Democratic Party. And the organizational aspects of the proposed rules changes, I don't think I would have any particular quarrel with. I do have these observations, however. The proposal that participation in the Democratic Party be limited, in effect, to card-carrying members of the Democratic Party gives me some pause, because part of the genius of the two-party system, it seems to me, has been the freedom of movement in and out of the party, the recognition of the fact that perhaps a third of the people in this country really are independents, and they move from time to time from one party to another. And it would be very disconcerting to me, and I think ultimately probably destructive of the two-party system, if we had a rigid membership requirements for these two organizations, which historically have been, if not public organizations, certainly quasi-public, in the sense that anybody had free entry into and out of those parties, and it has stood the country in good stead. And the point is that if you have a closed party, in the sense that, as I understand these rules, they propose to have, then you disenfranchise a very large percentage of the people from a significant step in the process of selecting the president of the country, and I would be very much opposed to that.
Of course, in Texas, the group that might be disfranchised, perhaps, is the conservative independent Democrat. Where do you think he might go? Do you think he might form a third party, become a Republican?
Well, I don't think it will be isolated to Texas. I think as a movement away from the posture that the two national parties have traditionally held, and that is a very broad, very diverse, very inclusive type of program and organization. In other words, their platform is inclusive. They include George Wallace, for example, and they include George McGovern and all types in between. And these are just leaders that represent not a few, but literally millions of people across the country. Now, to the extent that either party tries to divert from that posture, from that centrist posture, and tries to become an ideological force, a one-way sort of force in our political life, then I think the likely consequence would be the fragmentation of our party system, and I think that would be a very unhappy development for us as a nation. So I don't see it as isolated to Texas. I do observe that historically, of course, Texas has been predominantly conservative in its political mood, but notwithstanding that fact, except for the Eisenhower years, 1952 and 1956, it traditionally has supported the national candidate of the Democratic Party. So, I mean, I don't think they ought to be disenfranchised, is what I'm saying. And I don't think they ought to be required, or not just the Texas conservative, but the Texas liberal or any person in the country. I don't think they ought to be required to take an oath of fealty to a club in order to participate in our political processes. I guess that's really what I'm saying.